Okay, so this is going to be a lesson in how to create a jersey knit stitch. It's featured on your fabric terminology page 1. This is a stitch commonly used in sweaters and knit tops such as t-shirts. Anything with a jersey stitch that you would see commonly is t-shirts and sweaters. I wanted to show you first a collection where I did a whole sweater collection with a concept board and also some CADs. And I wanted to show this to you because I wanted to zoom in up close to show you what we're going to draw today. So here's an example of what I was talking about earlier, the jersey knit stitch. So we're going to create this kind of look in Illustrator through just creating like a V-shape kind of stitch. So that's kind of the look that we're trying to replicate. There's 2 ways you can do it. I usually draw this V-stitch kind of freehand, and there's 2 types of ways you can draw it. You can draw it with the pen. You're using the pen tool. You can draw it as kind of like, it looks like picture like a balloon that's shaped as a V. Letter V, but it's like a balloonish kind of shape with curved edges at the bottom, around the corners, everything's kind of curved. So if you're going to draw it freehand, you're going to draw it with the pen tool, but it's going to be a series of curved lines everywhere. There are no straight, perfect lines here. You're going to be constantly curving around all the corners. This is a grid that we created during our herringbone lesson, which I will be putting a video tutorial up as well later on. We created a grid, and that helped us to create certain patterns. So where we needed all the edges and everything to be perfectly locked inside of a box, such as this. So here's one V shape, which I will draw freehand in a second, but I wanted to also show you another way that you can draw this shape. You can draw it as 2 halves of the V that connect. So I'm going to draw with the pen tool, start at the bottom, and I'm just going to draw kind of one big curved line, and then I'm going to curve it again. Don't worry if your curved lines aren't perfect. You can always go back and change and pull at the drag lines that come off the curve and kind of smooth it out. And then I'm going to connect. So I'm just using this grid box to kind of give me my boundaries that keep it confined, so the V shape that I'm creating fits inside this box, so that the height and the width are confined within this parameters here. So it gives me a good guide. So pretty much, like, I didn't love the way this curved at the bottom, so I'm just going to pull off these drag lines here and kind of smooth it out. You know, I can do the same thing up here if I want to just make it a nicer kind of balloonish shape. Just like I said, picture this as kind of like a filled balloon that you're just creating these shapes with. So once I have one shape, you can copy and paste object transform, reflect. I'm going to reflect it vertically so it mirrors it. And then I can go and connect it like that. So that's one way. You can do the jersey knit stitches to look one of 2 ways. One, how I'm drawing it now, and I'm just moving these over so they fit inside the boundary box of the grid. One where it looks like that, and one where you draw. Either way is right. Like, you can get 2 different looks. So this one I drew using the pen tool, kind of freehand style, and it's a kind of a more organic looking shape than this one, which is kind of perfectly curved. Either way, the stitch is kind of the same in the end use, in the way it looks in real life. So this one I kind of just started to draw a V. Again, it was curved to begin with. Then I kind of, sometimes when you go from one curved line to another curved line, it's better to just break off the curve for a second so you get a better shape, because what happens is you kind of go from one curved line to another, and it kind of gives you this weird shape. See how that's happening? So sometimes what I do when I go from one curved line to the other is I break off of it for a second, and then I take the pen tool, go back to it, and I find that I get a better end result. Literally, you're just trying to do a shape like what's above. So you got to play with it. You just keep curving, connect back to the top, curve, curve. And like I said, even if it's not perfect the first time, don't worry about it. You can always go back, as I often do, and just fix the shape. But I just want it basically not so dented in areas like some of these are. Just smoother curves all around. And all I'm doing is just pulling off these little blue, I call them drag lines, these lines that come off the curve that kind of has the extensions that you can kind of pull on. This is more of an organic kind of shape of a jersey stitch, which is totally accurate too. So either way you want to replicate it, it just gives you two different looks, but they're the same kind of textured look that you need when you're doing a jersey stitch. So that's just two examples of how to do a jersey stitch. So basically, once you have your shape, I'm going to work with this one. Once you have your shape, you're going to then take it into Object, Pattern, Make. Hit OK. And now, as we use in Object, Pattern, Make, this pattern tile type tool, sorry, here in the right top left-hand corner. That's the tool we've been using with our herringbone weave as well. Click on that, and basically what you want to do, make sure your edges of the V touch on the left and right side, which they automatically do, which is great, but what you want to do in this window is actually pull up from the bottom and bring your V's so they literally sit right underneath of each other. They don't overlap. You don't want them to overlap, but you want them to literally sit like right underneath of each other, like they're stacked, right? Don't overlap, but they stack together. Then once you get that look, you hit done. And then you create, and these are just some finished ones I have up here, but the next step after that, anything you make in the Object, Pattern, Make window automatically creates a swatch box in your swatch window, which is Window, Swatches. So if you don't have that open, go to that and you will see your newest pattern swatch will always be at the end. Anytime you want to do a fabric swatch of what we just created, we're going to use the rectangle tool and just create a square, any shape you want your fabric swatch to be. Click on that pattern that you just created. Remember, the pattern always has to go in the fill box. Sometimes you automatically click on it because you're on the stroke box. You want to make sure it's in the fill box. And your stroke box should always be empty when you're doing fabric swatches. You should not have an outline color in that stroke box. So this is at the end of the day, that's what your sweater stitch, your jersey sweater or knit stitch looks like. Pretty simple. As we did with the twill and the twill overlay and the herringbone overlay tonight, we used them as overlays, which is pretty much like a layer on top of an existing pattern, such as these. So we took our twill weave and it just created it and put it over top of a plaid, and now we have a plaid with a twill weave. We took our herringbone that we created as a pattern, put it over top of our plaid, and now we have a herringbone plaid weave. Now, sweaters aren't normally, these jersey knit stitches aren't normally over top of patterns such as plaids. They're usually just over top of a solid color. So I'm just going to I'm going to do a red solid sweater. Fill my rectangle box with a red color. I'm going to put my jersey stitch over top of it, Object, Arrange, Bring to Front, so that I get my sweater texture over top of, I'm going to change this color. It's actually pretty bold. Let's do navy, something like that. And now I have a stitch, a jersey stitch that's now over top of a color. I actually have red in here. Let's get rid of that. Okay. So this would be my fabric swatch to represent a. Now I'm going to show you the different looks that this other V stitch that I created give me. So if you wanted to take this into repeat and give you a different look to a jersey stitch, but again, it's the same thing, just a different way of catting it. You're going to just grab both of the little balloon shapes that you use to create your V, grab them both with the black arrow, and you're going to take this into Object Pattern Make. And now you get a different look. But same thing applies here. When you're in the Pattern Make window, you still have to make sure that your V stitch touch on the left and right hand side, which it automatically does, but you still have to manipulate with the pattern tile tool to stack your V's on, but literally stacked like that. Now you can hit done. When it has the, now this is going to give you a totally different look, but that's totally fine. It's the same, two different ways of creating a jersey stitch. So I'm just going to use the same pattern, same colored pattern swatch, except now I'm going to fill it with the new jersey stitch that I did. The same end use, except you have one that's kind of a balloon shape that's like really organic looking, and one that's like almost perfect with these two balloon shapes that create a V that touch in the middle. So you can decide which way you like to create your jersey stitch. I have a library that has both options. And in this option, you can see that I chose to do the two balloon shapes that touched in the middle on this one. But either way, I've used both stitches to create my jersey knit stitch here. And then I want to do a chunky kind of look like this. I keep it this scale. When I want to do a finer knit, basically these are the two different looks. You have a fine knit jersey stitch that you'd find on maybe t-shirts, really fine, so much that when you look at your t-shirt stitch you really can't see the V's very well. You have to look really closely. Or you have a chunky sweater that you can obviously see the V stitches on. So you can just take any one of these, copy it, use the black arrow, scale it down smaller. So now I have a big and a small version. And this could be, I just do the same thing. I go Object Pattern Make, and I put this in the same exact repeat with the stacked look using the pattern tile tool, except now it's a smaller scale. So this is giving me a finer looking knit top and fine version of this. Let me put them side by side. So you can see the difference between these two. So I have one that's really chunky looking, and then I have one, and it's the same exact pattern origin. One that's chunky, one that's a lot finer.